It's heartening to see how far we've come as a society in understanding mental and developmental disabilities. These days, there's far more awareness and acceptance, especially in developed countries, offering real hope for more inclusive perspectives worldwide, even in places that are still catching up. But while we've made progress, there are still serious challenges that parents and caregivers face. Access to resources, understanding, and social support for those with disabilities can be lacking, even in modern societies. That's why it's not surprising to find that in a developed country like Singapore, people with developmental disabilities still face visible judgment and stigma. For caregivers, this often means navigating extra layers of stress and hardship. Today's story is about a heart-wrenching case that rocked the nation, involving two young boys with developmental disabilities: the killings of the Greenridge Crescent Twins. Navigating life with a mental or developmental disability can be challenging, both for the individual and their caregivers. It requires deep patience, love, and a commitment to learning for families to help their loved ones thrive. Thankfully, there's more support than ever today. Books, seminars, support groups, and even opportunities for employment that empower people with disabilities to live independently and break stereotypes. It's wonderful progress from where we were even just a few decades ago. But real change takes time, and it's not the same everywhere. In parts of Asia, sadly, there's still a belief that a child with a developmental or mental disability is a burden, or even worse, a punishment. Families sometimes go to great lengths to hide these children or seek out traditional healers, convinced their loved one is cursed or afflicted by dark forces. It's heartbreaking to think that this stigma continues, despite all the advancements in science and mental health support. This unfortunate perception seems to have impacted a family in Singapore as well. Xavier Yap Jong-hoon and Anna Siapui-hyung welcomed two twin boys, Ethan Yapi Chern and Aston Yap Kai, into their lives on October 14, 2010, after Anna had remarried and brought her daughter from a previous marriage into their new family. Together, the couple's future seemed hopeful and full of love. The twins, Ethan and Aston, were cherished and raised with care. But when the boys were around 2, the parents began to notice behavioral issues, suspecting early signs of autism. They hired a domestic helper to assist with the boys, though it's unclear if they ever pursued a formal diagnosis at that time. The family tried to manage on their own, yet the struggle to understand and support the twins only grew over time. In May 2017, the twins, Ethan and Aston, were diagnosed with global developmental delay and autism spectrum disorder at just 6 years old. Jong-hoon worked to accept this reality, but Pui-hyung struggled deeply, finding it hard to embrace her son's condition. By 2019, when the boys were 9, they entered Primary 1 in a mainstream school, yet they still couldn't communicate verbally and required either their mother or maid to accompany them to classes. Jong-hoon became even more hands-on, taking a larger role in their care and education, especially as they started primary school. However, Pui-hyung couldn't fully accept their condition and often treated the boys harshly, in stark contrast to Jong-hoon's approach. She even started an affair with an unnamed man, and Jong-hoon noticed her frustration toward the boys, turning into what he felt was outright neglect and abuse. He became aware of his wife's infidelity sometime around early 2022, shortly before the tragic event. This discovery, combined with what he described as her indifference toward their twin son's special needs and frustrations over their care, led him to believe that she had emotionally distanced herself from the family. Though exact reports of her actions are not clear, it said she had no patience for Ethan and Aston, frequently yelling and punishing them harshly, which weighed heavily on Jung-hoon. By December 2021, overwhelmed with mental strain, Jung-hoon began having suicidal thoughts, going so far as to buy an ice pick for this purpose. Then, with an important assessment coming in early 2022 to determine whether the boys could remain in school, Jung-hoon's despair deepened. Pui-hyung seemed to have given up on them, expecting them to stay institutionalized. Jung-hoon feared not only for their future, but that they might be left completely alone or bullied if anything happened to him or his wife. On January 21st, 2022, Jung-hoon's distress led him to consider an unthinkable path. Believing it might shield his family from further pain, he took his sons to the Greenridge Crescent playground around 4:45 p.m. After they played for a short time, he led each boy, one at a time, to a nearby canal. He initially tried to use a stick to press against Ethan's neck, but it broke, so he resorted to strangling him with his forearm. Aston, watching quietly nearby, was then subjected to the same method. After ensuring both boys had stopped moving, he submerged their faces in the water, ensuring both boys were gone. Afterward, Jung-hoon attempted to end his own life using the ice pick, but when it didn't work, he struck himself with a branch and a rock to simulate an attack, hoping it would suggest he was a victim as well. He then called the police, describing a brutal attack on his sons and claiming he had also been assaulted. He hoped that by lying to the police about being attacked, he would appear unremorseful or deceitful, traits that could lead to a harsher judgment. His idea was that if the police uncovered his lie, it might show him as unrepentant and fully responsible, increasing the likelihood of receiving the death penalty, and join his sons in the afterlife. After arranging the boys' bodies, he waited by them, sitting in the pitch-dark canal with their heads resting on his lap. When the police hadn't arrived, he left the canal and walked back to the playground to ask for help. Once authorities arrived, he reported that an unknown assailant, a tan-skinned man in his 40s, had killed his sons and attacked him. This led to an immediate manhunt, with police searching for any sign of the alleged attacker and questioning nearby residents for potential witnesses. His injuries, abrasions, shallow cuts, and bruises were deemed superficial, and he was taken to the hospital. Deputy Superintendent of Police Tan Bun-kok took charge of the investigation after Jung-hoon reported that an unknown assailant had attacked him and killed his sons. However, it quickly became clear that something was off. Witnesses had seen Jung-hoon with his two boys at the park, but no one saw any signs of an altercation, and there was no sound of a struggle. Based on the residents' accounts, police suspected that Jung-hoon wasn't telling the full truth. To piece together what happened, police brought Jung-hoon back to the park and canal for further questioning, giving him an opportunity to come clean. Back at the scene, Jung-hoon was visibly burdened by shame, and he ultimately confessed to killing his twin boys. Adding to the evidence, a swab taken from one of the boys' necks revealed Jung-hoon's DNA, which only reinforced the authorities' suspicions, as strangulation leaves traces of DNA on the victim's neck. On January 24, 2022, Xavier Yap Jung-hoon, then 48, was formally charged in court with the murder of his son, Ethan Yap Chern. Although Jung-hoon wasn't initially charged with the death of Ethan's twin, the murder charge under Section 302 of Singapore's Penal Code carried the potential penalty of death if he were found guilty. Placed in remand, Jung-hoon was transferred to Changi Prison's medical unit on January 31st, where he underwent a mental health evaluation. The assessment diagnosed him with moderately severe major depressive disorder, which was deemed to have impaired his mental faculties significantly during the tragic incident. Consequently, the initial murder charge was reduced to culpable homicide, not amounting to murder, a classification similar to manslaughter under Singaporean law, influenced by his mental health condition. On August 15, 2023, Xavier Yap Jung-hoon pleaded guilty before Justice Vincent Hung. Given the gravity of his actions, the prosecution sought a sentence ranging from 14 to 20 years, arguing that the term should be served consecutively. They emphasized the vulnerability of his young sons, who had autism, and highlighted Chung-hoon's calculated approach in deceiving and ultimately harming them by submerging their heads in the canal, ensuring their deaths. The public response to the Greenridge Crescent Twins case was intense. People across Singapore were deeply shaken, with many expressing heartbreak over the vulnerability of Aston and Ethan, two young boys with autism, whose lives were tragically ended by their own father. The community felt a mix of sorrow and frustration, struggling to comprehend Chung-hoon's justification that he was trying to relieve his family's burdens. Many Singaporeans acknowledge the real challenges that come with parenting children with special needs and the mental strain it can cause, but they drew a line. While sympathy exists for the hardships, these do not excuse violence. In court, prosecutors pushed for a strong sentence to send a clear message against crimes targeting defenseless children, and Justice Vincent Hung's remarks resonated with the public. By emphasizing that both boys had a right to live and rejecting leniency as the primary factor, the judge underscored the seriousness of parental responsibility and the need for justice for the boys. Justice Vincent Hung delivered his verdict on August 15th, denouncing the severity of Chung-hoon's actions as deeply immoral and heinous. While acknowledging the impact of Chung-hoon's depressive disorder, Justice Hung was clear that this did not excuse his actions. He stressed that rehabilitation should not be a priority in sentencing, given the nature of the crime. Consequently, 50-year-old Xavier Yap Jung-hoon received a sentence of 7 years for each count of manslaughter, totaling a 14-year sentence, which he is currently serving in Changi Prison. In court, Chung-hoon's personal letter was read, revealing his remorse and a profound wish to join his sons in the afterlife through a death sentence. However, his perspective changed when he learned that his wife, Pui Hyung, reacted with indifference to their deaths, reportedly discarding the boys' belongings and inviting her lover to their home shortly after the tragedy. This revelation pushed Chung-hoon to confess fully, expressing a renewed purpose in life. He wished to care for his mother upon release and hoped to pursue a diploma or degree to work in social services, aiming to help children facing challenges similar to those his sons experienced. The public was deeply affected by the tragedy, with many people visiting the canal where the boys' lives were taken, leaving offerings of toys and refreshments to honor their memory. Chung-hoon's mother, in a statement, shared that she missed her grandsons dearly and often dreamed of happier times when they would play together. And as for Pui Hyung, the boy's mother, how was she coping really? How does she go on knowing how her choices factored into this tragedy? It's hard not to feel angry, wondering if karma might catch up to her one day. And as for Chung-hoon, let's hope he finds the help he needs to reflect on his choices during his time in prison. In the end, this story reminds us just how important it is for society to step up and support parents dealing with challenges like raising children with special needs. Strong support systems are crucial, and we all need to do better in making sure families don't feel they're on their own. But let's be clear, most parents don't harm their children just because things get tough. Parenting may be overwhelming, but taking a life, especially of a child who depends on you, falls on the parents. It's a choice they make, And for that, they're the ones who should be held accountable. The twins, like any child in such a tragic situation, had no say, no choice, and no chance to fight back. This story is as much about responsibility as it is about heartbreak. Let's keep in mind the innocent lives lost and the urgent need to look out for families around us. That is all for today. Thanks for staying with us through this difficult story. See you in our next episode.